This podcast is brought to you by Infrastructure Masons, uniting builders for the digital future.
One, two, three, four.
Looking to turn your innovative idea into the next big thing in digital infrastructure? The iMasons Incubator is here to help you connect with industry leaders, spark awareness, and accelerate your path to success. If your concept can help drive a more sustainable digital future, we want to hear from you. Don't miss this chance to grow, give back, and shape the digital landscape. Email us today at innovation@imasons.org to find out how the iMasons Incubator can help bring your idea to the world.
Dive into the world of data center innovation with the iMasons podcast, discovering the people leading the industry revolution. My name is Romain Tranchant, and today I'm joined by Geene Alhady, president at Clark Pacific, a leader in design-driven prefabricated building systems. We have invited Geene to talk about the industrialization of design-integrated, low-carbon constructions and the business, cultural, and risk models required to make it scalable. Let's get right into it. Hi, Geene. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me, Romain.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast, and a topic that we haven't talked about before, mostly on the construction side. We've talked about many other things. But that's going to be a new one for me. So I look forward to learning a lot from what you've got to say.
Great.
Before we get into the topic, can you maybe present yourself and what Clark Pacific does?
Yeah, no problem. My name is Geene Alhady, a president at Clark Pacific, and a little bit about my background. And I've been in the building construction industry my whole professional career. I started in my first chapter as working for a large national general contractor, actually in the healthcare marketplace. And then the second part of my career was actually in construction technology, and had the opportunity to work internationally and witness how multiple international ecosystems are building large infrastructure. And compare that to how we achieve that here in the U.S., which was a real interesting part of my career.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that introduction. I think that's going to help a lot of our listeners place the topic that we're going to be talking about. One of the things that I found really fascinating is when we prepared for today, one of the things that you said was measurements change the way you go after something. What I'd like you to unpack for me on, to get us started, is in the context of prefabrication. Can you tell me what this means?
Yes, and so when we take measurements, I'll start with the big picture aspect of how we evolved at Clark Pacific. In traditional construction, how you grew a construction company was one project at a time, right? If I did one project and I wanted to grow, I do two projects. If I want to grow, I do three projects, right? And so that's the accumulation of projects is how you measure growth in the business. Now, when we convert to the industrialized approach, and I'll call it product manufactured approach, first thing we did is change how we measure the business. And the measurement is actually on market share of a specific market. It's basically how we change the lens at Clark Pacific, right? And in that, the big takeaway, and I'll this is very important, and I may talk about this at several points, is choose your market wisely, right? So that and the reason why that's important, does it have the depth and the breadth to allow growth for your organization? Does the market needs meet the value of your organization, right? And there's some, a lot of analysis and study that goes along with that, and why that's so important, because pursuing projects is much different than pursuing market share, which the investment and cost structure is different, right? We have to invest in market research. We invest in R&D around developing products that meet those market needs. And then the most significant is investing in infrastructure, right? Then to deliver those products, right, to that specific marketplace. And it's a longer term approach to how we run the business again, and then which changes how we measure.
So just to build on that concept of changing the measurements, we know that the industry has been largely driven by fear of failure, avoiding failures, and so on. Do you find that this is still true, that the industry is still largely focused on avoiding failures? And are you seeing more players designing for success from the start?
Yes, and again, over the last 5 years, you're starting to see this transformation take hold within the industry. If I get specific to your question, the traditional construction approach, I'll say in my first 20 years, is we take this concept where risk rolls downhill, right? And so, and when risk rolls downhill, it rolls, starts with the owner, goes through down to the contractor, the general contractor, and then rolls all the way down, cascades all the way down to the subcontractor, right? And so, and when you create that kind of those kinds of relationships, it creates this a protectionist approach that all the contractors take, right, is preventing failure from occurring, right? And so because you're constantly dealing with accepting risk with an unknown custom project on a custom site, right? Now we all deal with custom sites, right? Unique sites, but where we've evolved, right, is when you drive towards a product manufactured approach, your unknowns are less, right? You're developing a standard product that's repeatable. And so those unknowns are getting managed, and then it changes the relationship where we can be more aggressive on guaranteeing success for the customer. And guaranteed success comes in multiple categories. It can be, what we see in the data center and AI infrastructure, it's speed, right? We can commit to and guarantee speed as long as we agree on these specific parameters that are repeatable. It can be cost, right? Cost certainty is a big portion of this, because a lot of what happens in the traditional approach is these unknowns drive lack of cost certainty. When we actually drive toward a standard product, then the certainty becomes high. The key for us is that does our product allow for meet the needs of the value that the end user is looking for? That burden is on us, right? And can we configure in a way that supports the multiple needs that a singular owner, right, a singular end user, which may be deploying on multiple different site locations and geographic locations, can that value be consistent across those multiple programs?
What strikes me when you speak about what you do, and actually very eloquently, is that you borrow vocabulary that doesn't come from the construction industry. You really take from manufacturing, distributions, but not really what we tend to see in the manufacturing world. And I'm just wondering, so if you borrow vocabulary, you must have borrowed a lot of lessons and lessons learned from other types of industry to bring that into what data centers and what you provide for data centers. Can you take me through what sort of lessons, what sort of things you've learned or taken from those other areas, and that you've now applied into the data center industry?
For sure, yeah. And if I take a little bit of my background and where that kind of makes sense with the direction that Clark Pacific is, I spent 17 years in the construction technology, both in software and in hardware. And so now, obviously, with software, commercially available software, you're starting with a standard product that can be configured for the use of many end users, right? And so that, though our construction industry evolution is a little bit different than adoption of technology, the business model is generally the same, right? And so some key principles for us, I said the number one key principle is we are a product centric organization. The product is at the center of our strategy, right? And every part of our organization understands and develops value in relation to that product to, number one, provide strong end user value. Number two, drive efficiencies within the organization so that we can create cost certainty, right? And it's not just the, I'll call it the traditional way of looking at it in the context of project, the folks in our operations and project delivery. It also goes down to our accounting, right? And how we actually accumulate costs for our accounting reporting, and everything is centered around the product. Everybody in the organization has that relationship. And it started with one product, then we went to two products, that support multiple markets. And now we have many products around that basic business model. And so, if there's another lesson in our evolution, right, is once we develop this business model, then we said, okay, now that that's the case, I'll call it a manufacturing business model. Then we started bringing in people from alternative, I'll call it the manufacturing industry, right? And to help us amplify and pick up the pace of adoption to increase. But that was tricky for us, right? Because you're taking a company that's Clark Pacific has been in business for 60 years, that has been very successful at the traditional approach. You don't just say, okay, we're going to bring in somebody that's going to tell us that we're doing everything wrong if we want to be manufactured. It was very important that we brought in the right people that could complement us, meet the business where it is, and advance us one increment at a time. We've been at this for quite some time. Yeah. Always with the vision of heading down towards this industrialized model, which is driving us to a manufacturing business model.
I'm going to ask you about something, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the innovators out there are going to be really eager to understand how you guys have done it, because anyone that innovates in a market that's very risk averse will be faced with always the same question: does it work? Right? And so, with the methods that you're applying, with the way you're tackling the market, with the way you're building your products, you must, that comes at a risk. So what does taking a risk with something you look from your point of view and from what your clients are telling you, and how do you help your clients feel more confident about taking the leap into using new construction methods and new products?
Yeah, again, it goes back to that premise to choose your markets wisely. And so when we first started this, right, I would say there was a decent amount of headwinds in regards to how you're describing it. It's a new methodology, and how can I know it works? And so what we did is start very small, right, in small increments of where we may not productize the whole facility. It's just a specific component, so that you can wade into it with very limited risk. Okay, but as we begin to evolve, especially around the AI infrastructure or mission critical, you're dealing with end users that really understand this manufacturing business model, right? Because that's basically the models that they're operating under, right? Especially these hyperscalers, right? And so when you introduce this, I'll call it high value standard product concept, it's easily understood. And the adoption aspect of this, right, where we share values. Once we share values, then once we have shared values, we can create a shared vision, right? And that's when you're starting to see more and more rapid adoption around this approach. Though the trend is occurring in many markets within the building industry. The data, the velocity in the AI infrastructure is really forcing it to adopt fast.
Yeah, it's an interesting one where the market's now realized that it needs to do things differently with the amount of different pressures, and I can name a few: sustainability, a repeatable delivery, agility. All of this is what the market is actually demanding. Do you feel that actually changing the approach has helped you or prevented you from actually attaining a better grade on all those metrics? How does those things come together in your delivery model, and how does that work?
It's I mean, we are definitely at the tipping point now where we are seeing the benefit to both, most importantly to the end user, and and when there's a benefit to the end user, then there's a benefit to the builders, right? We're starting to get to that point. Now, the thing that where there's resistance, it was actually early in the stages of our approach to this because the initial engagements would be, my project is already designed, but I have a problem. I have a cost problem. Can prefabrication help me with my cost problem? The reality of it is that those become that's a struggle, right? Because in order to actually achieve the results, leveraging productization, product manufacturing, and prefabrication, we have to be engaged way early in the design process so that we can design an approach with the end in mind, as opposed to taking a design and actually modifying it to that's already been programmed and modifying it to our business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and this is an interesting one where productizations generally means normalization, right? So you typically take a product and make it repeatable because this is what drives the efficiency. But effectively, I'll be interested to hear your thoughts around how do you move away from delivery and design and move into move that cultural shift into collaborations, and how does that happen in practice, right?
Yeah, and I kind of alluded into this in the prior question, right? But we use the term DFMLA, which is design for manufacturing, logistics, and assembly. And so, and it's actually important that the team, I'll call it the project delivery team, right? Which we're a stakeholder in it, right? There's the owner, there's the designers, there's the general contractor, and there's the building product manufacturers. And if all of us start with this design for manufacturing, logistics, and assembly approach, you actually start with the end, right? Which is, okay, what is the programming and what performance are we actually looking for from an end user perspective of this facility? And then you start there, and then you work your way backwards to the design. Okay, how do I design for the most efficient delivery of this project or this facility, but you're leveraging our standard product to achieve that. Now, Clark Pacific, what our obligation is to ensure that we've R&D'd enough of this, the different configurations of our products, right, in order to achieve the value, the proposition that the programming needs of that particular project. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating because talking to yourself and your wider team, one of the things, and maybe something I should realize a lot more, the data center industry is only one amongst many. There is many others out there, but you know what it is. We only talk about data centers, and so
yes.
we think we're the only ones. But interestingly, you also mentioned that your products are being used in so many different other verticals. And can you take me through, because the product has evolved way beyond modular. So how does the platform adapt to so many different configurations? What's the secret sauce? We all want to know.
Yeah, so there's various terms that the industry uses. Modular is a term, right? And if you actually define modular, it means basically a three-dimensional, I would call it a semi-finished object, right? That you're delivering. The previous terminology would be offsite construction, which is taking a custom design and trying to manufacture it offsite. But where we've gone is the standard. We call it a productization is our approach, and our delivery method is panelization. And the reason why and what that is we are delivering logistically, I'll call panelized pieces, and then we are assembling these panels into a modular components in the field. And the reason why we do that is to offer the most flexibility It offers the most design flexibility. It's one thing to manufacture, but then we actually have to ship it, and then we have to assemble it, right? It offers the most flexibility to be able to achieve those objectives. As soon as we get overly modular, right, then you have shipping logistics issues, you have storage issues, right? And all of those steps need to be considered, right? When you're, and what determines the approach that you would take, whether it's using a Clark Pacific system or another system, is what is the performance metrics you're actually trying to achieve at the end of the day, right? And then a methodology, a prefabrication methodology can be chosen.
When we prepared, one of the things that you mentioned is being able to move the manufacturing away from the site actually gives you a lot more control over the different aspects of the products that you're delivering. And one of the things that you said, and you mentioned a program called Carbon Chilled, or a concept called Carbon Chill. I'd love you to run me through what that is, so that we can better understand how you align manufacturing and sustainability.
Yes, no, that's the great question, Romain. And so Carbon Shield is a product that we released several years ago that's constantly being developed. But if I was to give a description, it is a product that currently achieves 25% Portland cement reduction, and the carbon metrics that it achieves is 20% less carbon, right? 25% less Portland cement. As a result, we achieve 20% less carbon. And our goal as an organization, right, is to double that by 2030. But our limitation is available products in the market that have the proper R&D, but also have the where we have significant access. So as you know, we do very large projects, and we need the material to be available to us in abundance. And so it's still a lot of companies are focused here and doing R&D, and it's still an evolving market. Our goal is to be as aggressive as we can with this, but we can only operate at the pace of available products.
And it's just a thought that came to mind. As much as you're innovative in your products and in your approach to the market, I assume the supply chain that actually come and gives you the core components of what you need to do are also innovating. So you need to take that innovations, being able to build that in, so that creates a bit of a lag, but you are in effect able to incorporate those innovations too.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're bringing up a very important part, right? That is the supply chain dependence for these developed cement replacement materials are very important. And that is the critical path to more rapid carbon reduction. But it is a very important aspect of our product strategies that we have today.
So we know that any company pushing for sustainability is often facing trade-offs, and it could be, and we see that in the data center industry. It's either water or power. It's either, and those trade-offs are laws of physics kind of thing. You can't do one without having the other. Can you take me through what trade-offs you faced, how you overcome them? Is there some you've been able to break apart or together?
Yeah, and so I would say, if you look at sustainability holistically, there's some basic low-lying fruit that doesn't have trade-offs, right? And what are those? Man, we talk about product manufactured products leveraged in construction. We have all of our labor mainly comes to the plant location, right? So we're reducing the carbon footprint for commuters to go to the job site, right? So some basic things, zero waste, right? We control all the waste in our plants. And so we have a zero waste facility with no trade-offs to any of our end users. Where we do have the trade-off, right, is what we just talked about earlier, right? Is as we introduce lower carbon, produced by lower cement ratios in our concrete products, right, there are trade-offs, right? And cost can be a trade-off. The visual aspect of it can be a trade-off, right? But we're in the key for us, right, is performing the R&D well ahead of time so that all of those trade-offs are understood. And as time goes on, the trade-offs are becoming less and less and less.
One of the things I'd like to take you through is you mentioned that you were doing very large projects, and with that comes scalability, right? And manufacturing is a very good example of how to apply scalability, but it doesn't strike me as I would say construction products to be able to scale that fast. It can't be an easy thing to do. So what are the typical problems you face as a challenge when you're trying to scale these type of products, and maybe any breakthroughs you've been able to overcome by using the manufacturing mindset?
Yeah, and so I'd say, as a business that is evolving, with very big vision and ambition, but it can only evolve at the pace of adoption. The biggest risk that all of us face, and Clark Pacific too, is over investing ahead of the market adoption, right? And so, if you are doing traditional construction, you are awarded a project and then you source the project, right? When you are manufacturing a product, we actually have to pre-invest in infrastructure, right? And infrastructure ahead of market adoption, right? The key is that you create that relationship that's manageable, right? And that's why we take very incremental steps. And we say, first step is we invest in the actual R&D of a product, right? Then we invest in marketing a product, and we can test market adoption just with those two components before we actually have to make the biggest investment, which is infrastructure, after backlog is awarded, right? Or I would say in most cases, in anticipation of backlog being awarded. And as you start getting further and further into how we measure in market share, the more aggressive you can be with that infrastructure investment. And for us, what is that? You have to buy land. We need traditional machinery, equipment, infrastructure, people, right? And it's not just the actual staff members that are on the manufacturing line. It's all the infrastructure that's required, people infrastructure that's required to staff these facilities. And an example, in 1 year, in one of our facilities, we increased our hourly labor by 600 people, okay, in less than 1 year. And we had to train them, get them on the line and producing successfully. It takes leadership infrastructure and significant support infrastructure from IT to HR to finance in order to get that to occur at that pace.
It is absolute risk taking at that point, because you need the demand on the other side to exist for those production lines to work at full regime, right? But one of the concepts that you and I have talked about before that I found fascinating was, as much as you taking risk, is also sharing risk with the client. Now, it might sound as almost a defaulting the clients, the risk away to the clients, but you presented it in a very different way and very far away from the assumptions we might have from this. So what does it look like from your perspective when you talk about risk sharing from a Clark Pacific perspective with your partners and your clients?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so I think that it's important, right, to reflect on what I talked about earlier in the conversation, which is the traditional, ecosystem is risk rolls downhill, right, from the owner to the designer to the contractor to the subcontractors. Okay, and so, and as you evolve into this, standard productized, high end user values environment, things change, right? We understand that there's less unknowns, right? And the performance achievements can be greater, right? And so what does that mean? Is that and it's already happening. The relationships, the commercial relationships we're developing with our customers are moving well beyond a project, right? And And now we're engaging in overall programs. And so in order to achieve that, it's actually not only are we sharing in the risk, but we're sharing in the opportunity, right? And so, and we're working much closer together. And so, when I say sharing in the risk, what I mean specific, it's really easy, right? Is that as long as we work within these parameters, right, the risk is going to be manageable and we can share it, okay, on both directions. And so on the opportunity side, remember the biggest thing for a product manufacturer, whether it's Clark Pacific or somebody else, is certainty of backlog, right? And once we have this relationship where we're sharing the risk and we're sharing the opportunity, what it means for us is certainty and backlog is then we'll invest more R&D, we'll invest in more, make more in capital investments in infrastructure to then generate an exponential value and even propel this even further, faster and further for them.
So ultimately, how do you align with your clients and your partners on sharing those values and this approach to doing business? How does that work in practice?
Yeah, and so if I was to say the practical approach is one is when we engage in these types of I'll call it large opportunities, right? First thing we evaluate is, do we have shared values, right, with these organizations? Do they have experience leveraging this approach, right? And then when you look at the ecosystem, which would be owners, contractors, designers, and multiple subcontractors, the key stakeholder subcontractors, we will start working on integrating of our systems. And as simply as we do structure, integrating with mechanical, electrical systems, to try to get as much leverage in a manufacturer-controlled environment as possible, right? And so that's how these things are starting to evolve now. And then we're developing an R&D with third-party companies that we can duplicate from project to project to project. You're seeing that happen all over the place now.
I'd like to just evoke one last topic for today, because there's already a lot to take on. So we might need to get you back another time to complete the entire picture. But one of the things that fascinates me is you're really at the forefront of changing the construction industry. You're really trying to, I wouldn't say displace or replace, but complement, or offer something that moves away from the traditional way we've, done constructions for the last 100 years. And so do you think we've gone to as far as we're going to be? Do you think there is more to evolve? How, at what pace? What's the future look like?
Yeah, I think that this is, what's the term? Necessity is the mother of invention, right? We are clearly in the industry acceleration or the industry pace, right? In regards to the need for or evolution due to the velocity and the volume that's required around the AI infrastructure is, I think it continues to evolve, right? But what we need is more people in the party with these shared values and having experience with this new approach, right? And I transitioned personally from being a traditional general contractor into construction technology, selling productized technology to the same customers that we're selling buildings to right now. So it will happen. The adoption will occur. And so the pace is going to be the quicker we could get more people educated into the dance, the faster this pace will occur. But the key is, right, when you're in these engagements, I keep saying this, right? Shared values. Once you have, you can create shared vision. And so we have this motto here at Clark Pacific: is it's more important for us to do the right thing versus being right, right? And so the reality of it is each relationship creates a different dynamic to occur, right? And what we have to do is, and I'll go back to what I talked about, is that take an attitude towards guaranteeing success versus preventing failure. We have to guarantee the success. And what it means is that we need to give a lot to get a lot, right? And if each one of these partners in this ecosystem have that mentality, we're really going to do something here. And then in the next 10 years, this will be a completely transformed industry. And as I talked about earlier, in the conversation in my background, I mean, one of the benefits of working in the tech space construction technology and seeing the world in different geographic locations where the necessity of the mother of invention applies is in the Nordic region where they can only build 6 months out of the year. They have really made that 6 months efficient, right? Because of the harsh winters, right? And they are able to deliver capital programs equally or more efficient in that 6 months than we can do in a year. Okay. And then doing business in the Middle East, where a whole building industry emerged from very little, right, into this mega infrastructure in a very short period of time, because they did not bring forward the legacy, relationships. They actually started from scratch, which was vertically integrated, prefabricated, and now building manufactured building products, right? And so the U.S. market has this legacy, very successful legacy, by the way, of many, many years, but it created this ecosystem that we're trying to evolve. And so doesn't make it easy, but the opportunity is there and the need is there.
That's fantastic. I'm certainly very excited to see what's going to happen in the future, especially at the growth that we're seeing. Something's going to have to give, and hopefully innovation is going to be there to go and support. Geene, thank you very much for your time today. Before we part ways, I just have a bit of a message for all of our partners, members, and listeners. If you've enjoyed the discussions, there is more on the iMasons podcast. Go and listen to all the older episodes. We've covered loads of topics and published some of our recent panels as well. If you want to come and discover what we do, you have 5 options here. Please scan the QR codes. That will take you to our engagement hub, where you'll find different ways to do it. If you're not yet an iMasons member, go and sign up on the website. What you will also find is that on the website we have all of our events. So if you're a member and you want to go meet fantastic people just like Geene here today, please go on there, register for all the upcoming events, and you'll be able to find events local to you or online ones to come and discuss certain types of topics that you're particular about. And on that note, Geene, again, thank you very much for coming and talking about your company, your industry, and all the prefabrications and the impact that this has had so far. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to having you again in the future.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Infrastructure Masons is a global, non-profit, professional association of individuals connected and empowered to build a greater digital future for all. If you too want access to networking events, forums, and summits that foster innovation and influence, register now and join the other 6,000 committed participants at imasons.org/membership application.